Where should I actually sit? Should I sit here or
In the
this
flamingo.
one? Yeah. Well, then I'm kind of.
Yeah, do that, flamingo.
I'll start here, and then I'll take over at the half of the session. All right.
Yeah, so hi everyone. We're here to do a workshop, and we figured we'd split it a bit into two. So first we're gonna do a bit of a theory with many GIFs and many memes and much me, and then we'll dive into DevTools and let the Google developer expert take over. But first, let's talk about SUX on the beach with RUM. Basically what we were doing yesterday with all those mojitos that I'm still kind of feeling. Thanks for the birthday party, by the way. So, hi, my name is Karlijn. I feel like we've met, but if we didn't, I'm the CEO of RUMvision. I co-founded it together with Erwin, and I'm very important these days. So I also, you might know me from the Lady Magento initiative, where I say every woman, let's grab a cocktail afterwards. And I also am co-chair of the We3W group of RUM. Let me introduce.
Yep. I'll try to stand in the camera, because otherwise, here we go. Inception. All right. My name is Erwin Hofman, co-founder of RUMvision. I'm also, I became a Google Developer Expert, I think 2 years ago by now, which basically means that what I'm talking about related to Core Web Vitals, Google agrees with what I'm saying, you could say. Obviously, Core Web Vitals is coming from Google. And I'm a web developer already since 2001. There was someone yesterday that said, oh, I was born in 2001. Well, that's when I started developing, which was quite funny, I guess. I'm a performance consultant, so I'll be taking over for the DevTools part in the second part of this session.
So, because what is web performance? Web performance can be many things, and I needed to stay near the flamingo. It can be perceived performance, web types of website optimization, site speed, core web vitals. You might know it as the page speed score, UX optimization, front apps observability. Such a hard word. But I like to call it site speed user experience, or SUX, because then I can make many jokes, like I did in New York, where I called it SUX in the city, or here, SUX on the beach. And why should you care? Well, let's see if the audio works. No, it does not. Can we get the audio to work, guys? I screwed them up.
There we go.
Yeah. Can we do it again? Let me see. All right, because it's really cute. This, at its core, is what you're trying to prevent. Why is it taking so long to see something? And I mean, that's what you get when you have a web performance power couple. Meet Hannah. But there are other reasons to care, except for our little girl. There are many benefits to website optimization and SUX. It makes you more money. It literally is a case of good SUX sells. But there are more benefits. You get more visitors, you get a lower bounce rate, you get more signups to your newsletter because people stay around and they actually thought it was a pleasant experience. You get more conversions, you get more revenue, as we see down below as well. And even for SEO, it is a benefit. However, web performance in 2025 is very confusing. Because what do you look at? There are many things. Well, what happens? And I think that many developers here have experienced this. Your customer calls and say, hey, my site is slow. Could you fix it? And you say, yes, I have a perfect installation of the Hyvä team. We have a 99% page speed score. And then they ask, okay, but what about mobile? And sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's not. Okay, but what about core web vitals? That's fail. That is very often a fail, because Lighthouse page speed score is not the same as core web vitals. But try explaining that to them. So make sure you have the same truth. There are many tools in the world where you can check your web performance, and all have a truth, But what truth do you look at? We have RUM data, which is my favorite kind of truth. You have Pingdom, you have PageSpeed Insight, you have New Relic, WebPageTest, GT Metrics, Lighthouse. Let's go over them today. So we actually know which kind of truths they are, and we might find out if you agree with me that RUM is the best kind of truth. So Lighthouse here is lab data. And we all know this one, right? We all love it. It works very well on LinkedIn posts. And there are pros to it. It's always free, it's always accessible. It can actually run on your staging site, which is fun. It gives easy tips to apply, even though they might not always be the best in your situation. Everyone loves the PageSpeed score it gives. However, it's not based on real traffic. It just runs on your computer and how fast your computer runs. It has no relation to SEO. It does not interact with the site. It actually stops once it's loaded. Therefore, it can't include IMP, because IMP is an interaction measurement. The CLS is only measured on first load. Of everything that happens after can't be measured, and it does not measure time to first byte well. It misses many nuances. Also, it's quite easy to fake or hack, and as it became a business goal, it became much more interesting to do so. So Lighthouse, not my favorite synthetic tool. However, I don't hate all synthetic data. I think that might be thought sometimes, but I don't. He doesn't either. To debug performance, you want some kind of synthetic data. We just prefer WebPageTest or the performance dev tool, which we'll show you later. Because it can run a waterfall and it helps you as a developer diagnose issues once you know where they are. It can run simulations, it helps in staging a lot. And the performance panel, actually, I don't know if you guys noticed it the last 6 months, but it has a huge improvement, which we'll show you in the second part of this workshop. However, there are still many situations where things can change, and that's where RUM comes in. So, first nuance, lab data, field data. Lab data, performance score. Field data, core web vitals and RUM. This is Crux. Willem talked about it. And Crux is field data. Crux is measured on your real users' experience, and this is what happened. However, only over the last 28 days, and only on a very big pile. So, well, I'm very happy to hear that Hyvä is adding a Crux dataset to their dashboards, because it will absolutely help. 2 days after we release, we'll probably not show any new data, as it hasn't arrived yet, as it counts from the last 28 days. Then we have RUM. And what RUM does, it actually has a very small snippet that you add to your website with JavaScript. And this is a bit of a performance joke, because every third party in the world has a very, very small JavaScript snippet that has no impact on performance whatsoever. But this one does not. And what you can see here is we can actually compare trends. And when you do that release, you set an annotation, and then the day after you can compare, hey, it did or did not have a positive effect on my core web vitals on this specific template. So yeah, you can monitor and compare core web vitals in all browsers, because I don't know if you knew this, but that Crux data only runs on Chrome. Not anything else, not Safari, not Edge, not Opera, nothing except Chrome. Crux can help, so a RUM can help you with this. We have 40 other different metrics if you want to, and we do it in real time. You can set annotations, you can analyze third-party scripts, and we are also kind people, so we help you with quick wins, with onboarding, with anything. This is very much my commercial pitch, people. However, you kind of do need to pay for us, but I feel like the value is worth it. And Google does as well, because they literally recommend us as a solution to your core web vitals issues and to fix performance. So why? Why is there a difference? Well, Core Web Vitals meets a huge part of your SUX, and that is costing you money. Because why? What are we looking at? Well, meet percentiles, my favorite part of math. The 5th percentile always has the best experience. It has a really good one. The Core Web Vitals are measured on the 75th percentile. On the 90th, things get really bad. This is a meme, but this is reality. You see it very much here. It's very fast in the beginning, and the farther away you get, the slower the experience of the users are. These are all real experiences. So why are they different? Well, everyone is on a different device. And mobile versus desktop has a huge impact on the fastness of that experience. Whether you have an Apple or an Android also makes a huge difference. An Apple is much quicker than an Android and will always have, especially on the terms of interactivity, a much better experience. An expensive Android, like a €1,000 Samsung phone, will still have a better experience than a low of mid-end phone. That cheap Android phone, that has the worst experience, in case you were wondering about it. Everyone browses on different speed. We are all experiencing this right now here in the granaries. Our own sites are running slower as we are farther away from Europe. We are in Africa, people. It's nice. So if we're on Wi-Fi, our experience is faster. If we're mobile, it might be slower. 5 GB will have a better experience than 3 GB. And for all the people in Germany, I think you've had an experience in this. Sometimes there's just no internet at all. That gets you to the 99th percentile. But there are more nuances, because not only do we have different speeds and different devices, we all have our own customer journey. And the people who are experiencing your site for the first time, well, their SUX might be fucked. Their first user experience has 0 caching. And that is always a much, much slower experience than afterwards. Someone in successive will have a faster experience. And actually, this isn't one to keep an eye on. If you're running a lot of ads or campaigns, they are experiencing the site for the first time. They get an extra redirect because it's a campaign. You might have a cache miss, and that makes it for a very expensive campaign. And I'm not talking about anything, just I have data on this. This is our audience dashboard. It's actually our very first dashboard because it gets you everything I just told you about. You see that the time to first byte by ad traffic worsens in some cases. You see the different page view types where a successive has a much better experience than a unique one. You see different kind of navigation types, which we'll get into later. But also you see that on IMP and device memory, the 1000 MB or 8 GB device has a much, much, much better experience than the low-end phones. And you can also see, hey, how much of my audience is actually on that device, because that very cheap phone, not many people are on, but actually the mid-range phone is standing the highest and therefore is the default of your audience. So you should keep them in mind and test with that. Where do we stand with Hyvä? Well, we are at 51%. Could be better, could be worse. I feel like it can be much, much better. And actually, many of the people who are here probably have better results. And I really, as my personal goal, want to get you guys up to 80, because it is possible if you work with us. We want to beat Shopware and we want to beat Shopify. Right, guys? Yeah.
Or both.
So let me tell you how. To improve performance, you want the perfect cocktails of tools. And our favorite toolkit is the Chrome Performance Tunnel, in DevTools, the WebPageTest, Core Web Vitals 6-month history, which I'll show you later, and RUMvision. So let me show you how. Let's start with our first cocktail, time to first byte. User clicks the website and all systems go. This is actually the only backend related metric that we have. And it's the moment that it gets to work to show you anything. So Yeah, there are actually, oh, I had that one in my mind afterwards. There are actually many things in time to first byte. It's the server, it's the caching, it's the CDN, it's redirects, it's DNS. A lot happens in the time to first byte. And ideally you have it below 800 milliseconds. And while a good time to first byte doesn't necessarily mean you will have a fast website, a bad one almost guarantees a slow one. And it includes a whole of a lot. Like, many things happen in these first moments. Luckily, they're backend related things, so I won't worry with them. But there's a sad reality in time to first byte. Only 17% of Magento 2 sites have a good time to first byte. And if I can compare it to Shopify, 88% have a good time to first byte there. This is one of your biggest challenges in Magento, because it's heavy. And so therefore the first tip is, if you can optimize the back end, the front end will also benefit. And actually Ivan had a really nice post about it, and is also going to be on Hyvä, on the French Meet Magento one, talking about it. So check it out, because it always pays to improve your back end to improve your front end. What can you do aside from that as front enders? Well, I like to use RUMvision and to check out, okay, but what element actually is giving me trouble in the time to first byte? And for instance, here in this case, we see it's the server response times, but sometimes it's the waiting time, sometimes it's the DNS lookup. It can be many things.
And in the end, it's actually the sum of all components, obviously.
Yeah. True, obviously, yeah. Might be obvious to me. So, want to deep dive into the backend? Well, you can use New Relic, but you can also use RUMvision. Because together with your hosting, we can add server timing, and that allows us to expose many things what are happening in time to first byte that are slowing you down. And actually, as a basic tip, if your time to first byte is bad, it kind of always pays to do a call to your hosting company and see if they can improve things. So I'd start there. However, before you blame it for 100%, that's not totally fair. If you're running an international company, especially, so if you are in France and in Italy and in Gran Canaria and in the Netherlands, look into a CDN. The closer you are to your server, the better the experience is, especially if you're running an international shop. And also CDNs can help with many other things. Cache is cash. So the more that can be delivered from cache, the better it is. And varnish is your friend. The more the cache, the better it is. Here's a tip that I already talked to you about. Are you running a lot of ads and campaigns? If you forget to include those ads in your cache, you'll see that the experience is much worse, and it doesn't have to be. So if we're going to talk about cache, keep an eye on your cache hit ratio on ads.
I would like to add that especially the SRSLTID parameter was added by sites using Google Merchant Center out of the box. So most merchants didn't even know that Google started adding those to search engine results pages. And those started messing up time to first byte big time, because those pages were never searched from cache. So that was quite an interesting one. Yeah.
And it's still causing issues today. So actually, just to take away from this talk, check if that one is screwing up your time to first byte. Here's the good news though. Bad time to first byte also doesn't have to mean that you can't recover when reaching first contentful paint and large contentful paint. This is where Hyvä comes in. Yay! But still, I mean, if your time to first byte is 2.5 seconds, you are just utterly doomed. It's Carnival, people. So, this is when you guys can really get to work. And to understand page loading, it's vital to understand how a browser works, because that's the one you are working with. And this is actually a browser rendering process, and I'm giving this one to our Google developer expert.
Fair enough. All right. I'm going to stand over there, because I've got a nice screen over here. Well, I'll point over there.
Well, I would say to summarize, because there is a lot of information about in this slide, and I could even talk for 1 hour just covering the information in this slide. But I would say the most important parts are, there are two main tasks for a browser, which is the parsing phase and the rendering phase. And obviously, well, to me obvious, but let's put it this way. A browser first needs to parse the code before knowing what to render, which makes sense. It first needs to parse the HTML code, then the CSS as well, download the CSS before it's even able to paint any pixels into your screens or the screens of your visitors. And whenever the browser is blocked on a render blocking resource, it cannot continue to render the page. So if you've got which is something that Shopify is doing, if you've got a CSS, a style sheet in the middle of your body, for example, even then, that file will be render blocking. But at least it had a chance to already render anything that came before that style sheet. But typically, a style sheet is in the head section. So from the very start, a style sheet is render blocking, which means it really has to wait for that style sheet before it can continue parsing the rest of the source code, and then also rendering anything that's in your body, like your logo, your heading 1, typically containing your product title, and your product images as well. And I would say those are the two main tasks of a browser. And once you know this, it becomes easier to grasp the concept of performance, web performance specifically. And then there's another bottleneck, JavaScript. Well, Willem also talked about it a little bit, that's the biggest issue, for example, third party, but also first party. Especially if you have a single page application, for example, SPA, it tends to hydrate, for example, which is a huge bottleneck. So I think that's one very big reason why Hyvä is a very good initiative and a very solid alternative to SPAs. Because yeah, JavaScript then is added to the mix of rendering and parsing as well, and JavaScript is actively blocking the main thread. And I'm saying main thread because there basically is just a single thread when it comes to browser work. There are some alternatives to this, service workers, etc. But I would say fundamentally there is one main thread that is responsible for both parsing JavaScript and rendering those pixels to your screen, the CSS part, etc., layout parts. So whenever the browser is busy doing JavaScript work, it cannot paint. Or whenever the browser is busy doing paint work, painting those pixels into your screen, it cannot parse any or execute any JavaScript. So I might dive into this a bit later as well. But I would say those are the the most important parts. And once knowing that, it becomes a bit easier to grasp the concept of web performance and also debug maybe.
Yeah, so how to debug first contentful paint? Well, I tend to like to look at the Crux data first, just to get a quick overview of what's happening, then use RUMvision if I have it, and maybe WebPageTest or otherwise the DevTools. And my personal favorite way to view the Crux data is actually on our 6-month history list. We will go over it later, but I was just wondering, what's the worst web shop you made that you would actually like to debug? Do you have some? Or the best one? No one? Aw, it was my birthday. Yeah? Yeah? Does it have Crux data? Okay, which one is it? Whoa, sorry? Oh. Well, that will be a fun one to debug then. All right, well, I'll move forward. So if you had done this, you would have seen this. And this is actually at its core also what the dashboard of Hyvä will have, just a different look and feel to it. And what you see here is quite a typically Hyvä site. So we see actually already that the time to first byte was struggling, and we also saw it recovered by largest contentful paint. This is very typical Hyvä territory. We also see there are different issues in IMP and in layout shifts, and we see navigation types, which we'll come back to later. And in many cases, therefore, the FTP can be explained by that time to first byte that we covered. but not always. What do you think happens here? Any ideas? Anyone wants to give it a shot?
So the time to first byte is very solid, I would say. But then the time between time to first byte and FCP, well, you can see a clear gap from, I'm not really able to see, 300 milliseconds to almost 5 seconds. So that's a 4.7 second gap from time to first byte until the first moment the visitor is able to see anything at all.
Yeah.
So
any shots? Lazy load. Okay, you? Huge image. Other people? Yeah. Anti-flicker shift. Actually, that was a good suggestion as well. Yeah. Other people? It was an A/B test. A/B test can really screw up your FTP, and we see this very often. Not that bad. But looking at a widescreen for a really long time, which an A/B test to cause, is usually an indicator that this is happening. And a fun fact, that widescreen is the most frustrating thing to a user of everything that happens on the web. It can raise blood pressure by 20%. That's a health risk. You don't want that. So we are developers and we can obviously debug that better, and we can do that. Usually it's rarely this bad, but very often it looks like this. So if I see this weird time to first byte and then a dip, I tend to think, okay, this is a third party messing with us, and it's usually an A/B test, especially obviously on web shops because they love A/B tests. So how do you fix those A/B test influences? Well, access to Google Tag Manager, even if it's only read access, really helps you as a developer because you can see what marketing is doing. And then show them the effects, show them that very red thing that might scare them. Ask them to experiment with sampling and maybe make it conditional to a good internet connection. And when they are not running an experiment, shut it down. Let's move over to LCP, largest contentful paint, our first core vital. And this actually shows us very nicely what the difference is between an FCP and an LCP. The LCP is the moment that to a user, it feels like the page is visually loaded. It doesn't have to mean that everything is loaded, but it feels loaded. And this confirms the usefulness of a page. So how would you debug it? Well, we like to use SUX, RUM, and WebPageTest. How do you improve it? Well, to get back to how a browser renders, make sure that the browser can find what it needs easily. Put everything it needs near the head. But don't lazy load your LCP. This is seriously one of the biggest issues that we often see. Make sure that you know your LCP. Make sure you give it a fetch priority high, because that really helps performance. Do not lazy load it, because then the browser thinks, well, this is not important, and it waits for it. Then you never get an LCP. Server-side rendering is always preferred. It can be cached. And the one we all know about, images and videos should not be very large, obviously. But hey, we heard that's going to be fixed, and only in 10% of the cases this is the problem. And like I already mentioned, make sure you know your LCP, because I don't know if you ever thought about this, but a 13-inch laptop or a widescreen or your mobile, those weird flip-out phones, might all have a different LCP. Lighthouse will never tell you this. A RUM can. Here's the biggest tip on LCP I can actually give you. Add speculation rules. Speculation rules came out last year, and they are, well, I think they're groundbreaking. Because what it does, it pre-renders your site, and well, you're hovering to it. So it anticipates where you will go next. And actually, I had a YouTube video of Willem, but I'm not feeling very confident about the YouTube video. But you can add it in 5 minutes to your store. It's an experimental tab of Hyvä, and just check out this QR code. I'll share it later. Everything I'll share later. But in 5 minutes, you can add it, and what it does, it makes your site instant on the next navigation. It will anticipate what you will do next. It's just literally 5 lines of code. However, you can do it in 5 minutes, but maybe you should not. There are some things you should know about. First, let your hosting know if you're going to do it, because it can add additional traffic as it's pre-rendering the next pages. It's not a lot, but tell them. Let your marketing team know, because it can impact analytics. Again, you can fix this, but you need to know about it. Make an annotation of it in RUMvision, and we will be able to compare before and after, and that is fun. And you can share that to your team and to your product owner and to the merchant. Just say, hey, we fixed LCP, long live navigation, soft navigation. And you do need to know that it only works on Chromium browsers. So Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera, Safari, it does not. Firefox, it does not. And I don't have a timeline on when that will be available. So it doesn't fix everything, but it can help a lot. As we can also see here, we have on all metrics, actually this is an IMP one. Can also work for IMP. It actually helps for everything. CLS also really benefits from speculation rules. It's basically Core Vitals life hack. So now that we know this, and this is also where I kind of doubt how I'm gonna do this. Let me see if this works. This is back-forward cache. And we see here the loading of a screen. And now he goes to the back button. And you see it's instant there. And you see it's a complete reload over there. This is back-forward cache. And that is kind of speculation rules, but in reverse. Which is great, right? That sounds like a good idea.
Especially as it's a browser native solution, so you don't need to add a lot of stuff. When it comes to back-forward cache, you don't even need to add anything. You just need to be sure that you are not blocking this mechanism. And in RUMvision, you can see the bottlenecks that would block or are actively blocking the back-forward cache mechanism. And when it comes to speculation rules, it's just a set of JSON code that you can inline in your head section or dynamically using Google Tag Manager, for example. So those are really browser native solutions.
However, yeah, so some bad news for you guys on Magento. 89% of Magento stores use the HTTP cache control no store. And that means that it is ineligible to back-forward cache, which sucks. So there's a good news though. Chrome is currently testing with ignoring this. Conditions apply, you can check them here. And that way you guys could benefit, because the cache control no store, I mean, is really, it can invalidate everything, and it always will. It literally destroys all the cache. So that causes more issues than just to back-forward cache. But to back-forward cache, this is also very sad. It will remain in the browser for 3 minutes, and they're testing with it now. How are the results? I asked them last week. Well, they're not that great yet, because what Erwin was saying is that there are more reasons why back-forward cache can't be used. And actually on Magento, 20%, 26% still have issues with 2 other reasons why back-forward cache fails. However, it can absolutely be fixed, and I would suggest looking into it. Because it's well worth it, and actually also it has baseline. So like Erwin said, it runs on all the browsers. So everyone who goes back, and that's many people, could benefit from baseline, from back-forward cache. To just show you how much it could be, you see here, for instance, that people, this is a Hyvä site as well, and 28.3% went back. That's the red button here. Does this work? Let me see.
Well, basically meaning 28% of visitors are hitting the back or forward, typically the back button, to go back to the listing page most often. But the browser was never able, we can see the green one, BF cache, no page was restored from the back-forward cache mechanism from the browser, meaning that this site is actively missing out on
Well,
almost 30% of users could benefit from this.
Yeah.
So yes, if we're gonna talk, that's LCP. Those are some tips on LCP, and with debug later. We're moving on now to cumulative layout shift. Because shifting is annoying, except when we're making cocktails. But how to find and prevent? Well, what does it do? It measures unexpected things. And I think we've all experienced this in our life, right? We were reading something and suddenly an ad came up, or suddenly something shifted and we pressed a button, or we were like, this was annoying. That's CLS. And actually, fixing CLS is really, in most cases, rather easy. You just need to keep an eye out on it because it happens very, very easily. What do you need to do? You need to reserve space for elements that appear later with a width, height, or an aspect ratio. You want to have a font strategy in place. You want to use CSS when you can. This actually, every single metric that we're talking about will always benefit from using CSS instead of JavaScript when you can. But the biggest challenge is always finding them because, well, we already discussed many types of devices. Let's also consider many template types that exist. So the last one, the newest one, IMP, the slowest response to a user requested action. What causes it? What does it do? Well, it measures interactivity on the whole site. So every element that you click that has an accordion that switches out, or a color that changes, or anything at all that a user wants to do that needs a refresh on the page is measured in IMP, and it reports the slowest one. And fixing IMP was very hard the last couple of years, and it's actually gotten lots and lots more easy, which is nice, and we will show you. You kind of expected this one, I think. Third parties can have a huge impact on IMP, and this is actually something we are able to measure. This was obviously on the Shopify site. Oh no, this is actually my whole data set.
Yeah, whole data
set.
set.
This is my whole data set. Well, what do we see here that is interesting? We see that Google Tag Manager actually is not the biggest issue in our lives, causing delays. What we see is that Hotjar very much is, and no, doesn't work. Okay, Hotjar, also New Relic can be a really big pain in the ass of performance. You remember that small JavaScript snippet that I mentioned? This is all of that. Cookie banners are also a huge problem for IMP.
A/B testing.
I was just going to say it. A/B testing. We talked about this. Also an IMP, a use issue. However, it doesn't always have to be. It does not always have to be a third party, but it very often is a third party. What do? You can use yielding, and that means that if we're going to talk about the main thread, you say you are not important enough to hinder my user. Go away. I'll talk to you later. Keep an eye on third parties. Well, we talked about that. Be mindful of your own JavaScript, because Alpine.js actually is still a very large JavaScript file. Use Xdefer if you can, that helps. Buy everyone the newest, most expensive phone, because, well, we saw that in the data earlier. The better the phone, the better the experience, but it might get a bit expensive. Or use RUM data to save you a lot of time debugging where those issues are. So here's a win. Just to go back to what the browser can do. The browser actually helps you. And if you remove lazy sizes to native lazy loading, which is baseline, meaning every browser has it, it already is an improvement of 8.8%. So yay, stay away from JavaScript, people. Giving it over to Erwin now.
Alrighty. I think I'm going to move this over here if nothing is falling off. Alright, it all works. Alright. I've got some slides available and then dive into DevTools as well. I think I'm going to, time-wise, going to skip the slides themselves, but at least the things I'll be discussing will be in the slides. It will be available for, well, reviewing later on, following the links later on, etc. I asked, I'm going to, well, let's start with a little interactivity. Talking about interactivity, let's start doing this. So grab your mobile devices. Because of the weather, I did not expect everyone to actually wanting to open up their laptops, but maybe you are willing to use your mobile devices today. So if you go to the mentai.com or just simply scan the QR code, if you choose to go to mentai.com, then use the code 44969310. I see that by now 5 people were able to join already. All right. We could get a bit more. 13 and counting. All right, I'm going to proceed. Yeah, here we go. I don't have a quiz, but I do have a few questions, just because I'm curious what kind of people we have in the audience. So we at least have 2 front-end developers, 3, 6. Who's offering more? Mainly backend developers, apparently.
Oh, I did a whole talk about front-end and we had backenders.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is at least interesting to know, interesting information for backend developers so that they know what to talk about with front-end developers. I did speak to a few people from sales marketing as well yesterday, so I included that one as well, but only 4 apparently. Who are the sales and marketing people today? Yeah, okay. Any more fingers? No, all right. All right, I'm moving on to the next one. What are you mainly working on? For example, Hyvä developers are obviously working on a product instead of working for actual clients. They are working for clients indirectly maybe, but are you mainly working for B2B clients, B2C? Working on a product like Hyvä? All right. I think this was to be expected maybe. And another one. What do you consider your knowledge of, rate your knowledge, let's put it that way, rate your knowledge of Hyvä, LCP, CLS, and IMP?
Well, I mean, maximum now, right? But I gave this talk.
Sorry? Yeah,
well, maximum now,
okay.
right?
Maybe before this session. All right. So yeah, IMP is the newest metric in town. It replaced the first input delay metric in March 2024. So again, this was to be expected maybe. And moving on to the last one. What are the performance tools you're using or that you've used in the past? Rate them as well to give us an idea of Lighthouse, okay, DevTools, Google Procs. I do need to add that most are serving a different purpose. DevTools, Lighthouse, WebPageTest are more diagnostic tools. RUM tool as well, by the way, while Crux data is quite basic. It is basic because you can't really segment into the data, and it's based on a 28-day period, meaning if you're deploying something today, you won't see a change in Crux data tomorrow. You might start to see a change in Crux data after 3 weeks because they are working with the 75th percentile, and 75% of 4 weeks is 3 weeks. Maybe a bit too much math today, but nevertheless, Crux data is delayed, which is also why we started building our own RUM tool, and to add a lot of segments, dimensions on top of it, so that you can really filter into the data and draw solid conclusions and know how to reproduce issues. So if you're seeing issues, you probably want to solve them, and the RUM tool is able to show you under which conditions those issues are happening. All right, let's move on. This was my last question, so I'm going to dive into DevTools now. I asked, I got a case from a Vendic case, and a Magento agency from the Netherlands.
Golden partner of RUMvision.
And a partner as well. So let's start with a migration to Hyvä. You can clearly see when it happened. Each bar is representing a new week, although each bar is also representing the 28 days before. But each week, Google is publishing new data in Crux data. And we can basically see that this bar that I'm hovering over now represents fully new, fresh data after replatforming to Hyvä. And the percentage is showing a improvement of 92% time to first byte improvement. As Karlijn showed before, this then also results in an improvement, should typically result in an improvement when it comes to the FCP. So the time to first byte really is a technical metric. My parents, they won't know when a time to first byte is happening, but they will know when the screen is not white anymore, which is what matters for users. And even the FCP was showing an improvement of, again, 93 actually, 93%. That's quite massive, I would say. LCP is also a page speed metric. IMP isn't really a page speed metric. CLS also really isn't a page speed metric. The first one is a performance metric and the other one a user frustration metric, I guess, but not really a page speed metric. LCP is. So LCP is impacted by time first byte. So are we able to see an improvement over there as well? Well, yes. 86. It was already passing Cool Web Vitals, the LCP at least, but it still achieved an improvement of 86, almost 87% by migrating to Hyvä. They were already running on Magento, by the way. All right. I was allowed to use the same case to do some stuff in DevTools. So that's what I'll be going over now. And let's start with the first one that I have over here, which is search in files. So whenever you would look in RUM data and see that there is an issue with the unload event handler, for example, that's blocking your BF cache mechanism, causing a 0% coming from the back-forward cache mechanism, you might want to find out, okay, which file is still using the unload event handler. What I'm typically doing is I'm going to put my focus in the filter bar in the network panel in DevTools, then hit, on Windows at least, Control F. And now I'm able to, you saw how a new panel was opening up, so I'm going to do it again, Control F, and a new panel is opening up. So I'm now going to search in search, well, yeah, basically going to search in the contents of all files. So within this panel, I'm only able to filter on the file names, but in the new panel that opened up, I'm now able to filter in the contents of all files. And I could, for example, search for anything that's using the unload event handler. Obviously, it's not like all these files are now actively using them, but at least I've got some solid pointers as to what to look into. When I discovered this feature, I was, well, mesmerized maybe, but this was a very awesome feature because before I was doing this manually, which is taking a lot of time. So this was a very good start of being aware of this feature when debugging. Another one, let's go to, well, the HTML file itself, network panel again, response panel specifically. I'm seeing, I could also do this for JavaScript files, any files basically. I'm seeing the contents, obviously, of this file, and I can now beautify it or pretty print it by using this little icon at the bottom left. And then I get some beautified version of the same contents. I'm typically using this because I always want to make whenever doing an audit, I want to make a backup of the HTML file of a specific date when I was doing the audit. In case I need to compare it with, well, whenever an agency or merchant themselves did some changes and followed up on my recommendations. I want to make a comparison, obviously, but I do want to look into, when manually looking into the contents, I want to have some beautified version of the HTML file. So this is a nice little feature. Let's move on to the next one. So search in file contents, then pretty print, the coverage panel. And I have to add that I typically don't use this one because it's quite a depressing feature maybe, as in, well, that's not the correct one. Coverage panel, refresh this page, and it's now automatically detecting what percentage of the file contents of each individual file is actively used up until this moment. Up until this moment, because whenever I start to interact, the percentages might change because now more JavaScript is used because I interacted with the web page involving more JavaScript. Nevertheless, I still have a quite a very, well, convenient overview of the usage of each file. For example, this is showing that almost 90% of the style sheet is not used on this page. So this might be an indication that we could code split this CSS file, for example, maybe based on templates. So create a CSS file per template product page, listing page, and then maybe a last CSS file to cover all other minor pages, user-related pages, checkout, I don't know. Depending on how big a CSS file would become per template. I also acknowledge the fact that the same is happening in Shopware, for example. I do acknowledge the fact that typically CSS files are bundled into one file, but it could be an FCP and then also an LCP bottleneck. Otherwise, you might see a lot of third parties which you cannot really solve yourselves because you don't get to dictate or change the contents of a third party, but you could decide to, if a third party really is a bottleneck, if RUM data is showing you that a third party is a bottleneck, and this coverage panel is confirming that a lot of JavaScript is not actively used, but it still needs to be parsed and compiled by the browser, so it's still executed on a main thread and blocking the main thread, you could decide to, well, if this is a chat widget or the search bar, use xdefer, for example. All right, again, I have to admit and add that I typically don't look at this because I don't want to optimize just for the, well, matter of optimizing. I first check RUM data to see what actually is an issue in real life, and then try to solve them instead of just trying to solve anything. Yeah, everything, I should say. Coverage panel. All right, the new performance panel. I'm not sure how many of you has seen this new performance panel. They try to make it a bit more convenient maybe and low level to use. You can hook into Crux data. You first need to accept the terms, etc. So that's why I'm doing this in the incognito tab, because then I'm forced to again accept the terms, etc. I already did that obviously in my typical screen. So let's go to this page specifically, or a new panel maybe. Inspect performance panel. Load this page, get rid of this one. And as of this moment, I can basically start to interact with the web page, and you will already be able to see the interactions at the bottom of the page, for example. And you can just start to interact with the web page and see the highest delays per interaction. And if I'm seeing one, for example, if RUM data is showing me that a specific interaction is causing a specific element is often involved with IMP issues, then I'm not starting a performance trace from the very beginning, but I'm going to start one now. I can even throttle the CPU to simulate a slower device, for example. So let's do that. I'm going to simulate a slower device, start the recording, and now going to interact with whatever element RUM data is telling me that it is an issue in real life. Now, I'm done interacting, because again, RUM data told me that this element is typically the issue, so I only want to concentrate on this one instead of doing a full performance trace, and my interaction should be visible somewhere over here, interactions, although I'm not seeing it currently, or this web page is just optimized and I'm not really able to see anything here, but here it is. 65 milliseconds is involved with this interaction, which, just like the time to first byte, exists of multiple components, or as Google like to call them, subparts. So in this case, when hovering over this specific interaction, I can see that there was an input delay of 5 milliseconds, which means some other JavaScript was still running when the user interacted with the web page. Then there's a processing duration, and then a presentation delay, because obviously if I start to add a class to my menu, that should result in the menu becoming visible, a new layout needs to be rendered. So that's what is causing the presentation delay. And over here I can, well, clearly see, dive into all activities on the main thread, for example. There's another, let's dive into the LCP as well. this is also part of the new performance panel. So if I go to this slide out collapse menu sidebar, I can now dive into the IMP specifically, or if I start a performance trace from the very beginning using this button, the refresh button. So I'm now starting a new page load. Everything is being measured. I'm going to stop the measurement. And now I can click on the LCP by phase, and then the performance panel is basically showing me each individual phases and also the time spent per phase. So for example, the resource load delay, did it take long for the browser to even discover the LCP image? Or the resource load duration, did it take long to download the image, for example, because you're not using a WebP image yet? Or element render delay, was the browser still busy doing some other work, and as a result it could not render the image despite the fact that the image was already done downloading, for example. So yeah, typically you might not be aware of the fact that multiple subparts are involved with the LCP. It's not just a matter of downloading the image. The image also needs to be discovered to start with and needs to be rendered, for example. All right, and the last one, which I think is quite convenient, but I like to believe a lot of stuff in DevTools is convenient. It was added recently, which is called Extensibility API. And I've got a snippet saved in my, well, also quite convenient by the way, show snippets. You can save snippets that you use quite often, for example. You can just save them to your DevTools so that it is easier to reuse them in the future. So I've got some quite some snippets lined up over here. One of them is custom timeline, because you can create your own tracks in the performance panel. So you can see a lot of tracks. Might be a bit overwhelming, but you can see a lot of tracks over here. And one of them is the LOAF, one of them is a custom track, which I called LOAF, to see where long tasks are happening. And I can basically, another nice feature, overwrite the contents of this file, going to overwrite content, and now just change the amount of money that I have in my bank account and prove to my wife that I'm not misspending my money, for example. Or if I actually want to debug a website, insert a bit of JavaScript and create my own timeline, which is what I did over here. And the result is, well, this specific timeline that is then make it easier for me to debug IMP issues, performance issues in general, etc. There are many more hidden features into DevTools, but I hope this is already giving you some hands-on pointers as to how to debug in the future. All right, and I think that also time-wise I'm going to keep it at this. Performance panel, show all events is an interesting one. Custom performance track, I discussed that already, and the last two slides.
Yeah, you can put it back on the large screen now. Because to wrap things up, what happens? Well, we told you about it. Things happen in real time and you want to have eyes on it. And if a new third party got added, you want to know about it, that A/B test that we talked about, because your core web vitals got worse. And the cool thing is you can get an alert in real time within a day and you can check out, hey, which template was having trouble? Can we fix that? Well, you obviously can. And then all your core web vitals are happy again and nobody got bothered. So yeah, optimizing web performance has never been easier. And you've got this. And if you need any help, just reach out to us because, well, we're a web performance power couple and we like to talk about these things. Thank you very much.